Picture this. You are sitting in what feels like a sterile waiting room from the future, watching strangers live their entire lives through augmented reality streams, while an automated voice methodically calls out names like some dystopian roll call. This isn't science fiction anymore. This is the world we're rapidly approaching, where the line between human consciousness and digital interface becomes so blurred that we might not even notice when we've crossed it. What I am about to share with you comes from a deeply unsettling yet fascinating exploration of this near-future reality, a complete audiobook experience that dives headfirst into the psychological and philosophical implications of brain machine. It is called Millions of Little Threads, and it represents something entirely different from the content you are used to seeing on platforms like this. This isn't your typical YouTube-friendly narrative. We're talking about a full hour of unfiltered, uncompromising storytelling that explores territories too complex, too dark, and frankly too intense for the sanitized world of algorithm-driven content. For just $3.99, literally the cost of your morning coffee, you can access a complete audiobook that pushes every boundary of what speculative fiction can accomplish. Think of it as existing somewhere in that haunting space between Kafka's existential nightmares and Black Mirror's technological horror stories. It is philosophical content that doesn't apologize for its complexity, speculative fiction that refuses to provide easy answers, and a meditation on progress that questions whether we're moving forward or simply falling deeper into an abyss of our own making. At the heart of this story lies the brain-machine interface, or BMI, a revolutionary device that doesn't just interact with your thoughts, but becomes an integral part of how you think. Imagine technology so advanced that it reads your neural signals directly, allowing you to control devices, access information, and interact with digital environments, using nothing but the electrical impulses firing between your neurons. But here is where the story gets truly unsettling. What happens when this technology becomes so normalized that waiting rooms are filled with people getting these devices implanted as casually as they might get a dental cleaning? What does it mean for human identity when the boundary between your organic thoughts and digital enhancement disappears entirely? Let me paint you a picture of what this future looks like through the eyes of our protagonist, Kennedy. He finds himself in a clinical environment that feels both futuristic and eerily familiar. Automated voices, sterile corridors, and the kind of bureaucratic efficiency that makes you feel like just another number in a vast system. While Kennedy waits, he passes time using an augmented reality application that lets him watch real-time perspectives of other people who have monetized their entire existence. These individuals live stream their lives, selling their decisions and actions to audiences who consume their experiences like entertainment. Kennedy watches someone called Pico, a content creator who specializes in street interactions and public spectacles. Someone Kennedy finds completely obnoxious, yet can't stop watching. There is something profoundly disturbing about this detail. Kennedy watches another person's madness because it makes him feel saner by comparison. It is a perfect metaphor for how we already consume content, seeking out the chaos and dysfunction of others to feel better about our own lives. But in this future, that consumption has become literal, direct, and neurologically integrated. When Kennedy's name is finally called, he enters a world of surgical precision operated entirely by machines. The procedure room contains nothing but a surgical chair, two white bionic arms that look disturbingly like prosthetic human limbs, and an array of sleek machinery that performs the most intimate violation imaginable: direct access to the human brain. The process itself is described with clinical detachment that makes it even more horrifying. Kennedy receives conscious sedation tablets that flood his system with artificial bliss, dissolving his sense of self while maintaining just enough awareness to follow instructions. As the euphoria takes hold, a helmet-like device scans his brain while simultaneously drilling through his skull. But here is the truly unsettling part. The machine doesn't just install a simple device. It implants hundreds of tiny threads, each containing hundreds of independent electrode arrays. connecting hundreds of thousands of electrodes directly to neurons throughout Kennedy's brain. These aren't just connections, they're integrations. The threads become part of his neural architecture, and the BMI device becomes as much a part of him as his own thoughts. After the procedure, Kennedy returns to his apartment, carrying a small package containing his instruction manual and wireless charging port, because even revolutionary brain technology needs to be plugged in regularly. The mundane reality of needing to stay within 20 feet of a charging station to maintain reliable power adds a darkly comic element to this technological transcendence. When Kennedy finally activates his device by holding down a button on top of his head, something extraordinary happens. A heads-up display appears, but it is not in front of him, it is inside his head. The distinction is crucial because it represents the complete collapse of the boundary between internal and external reality. This story operates on multiple levels simultaneously. On the surface, it is a compelling narrative about technological integration and its immediate consequences. But dig deeper, and you'll find a profound meditation on the nature of progress itself. Are we advancing towards something better, or are we simply creating more sophisticated ways to lose ourselves? The story explores what it means to find oneself caught in what the narrator calls the whirlpool of existence. That sense of being swept along by forces beyond our control, while maintaining the illusion that we're making conscious choices. Kennedy's experience with the BMI becomes a metaphor for how technology already shapes our thoughts, desires, and perceptions in ways we barely recognize. Creating this as an audiobook rather than traditional video content serves a specific purpose. Audio storytelling allows for a kind of intimacy and psychological depth that visual media often struggles to achieve. When you are listening to a story, especially one dealing with consciousness and neural integration, the experience becomes more internal, more personal. The audiobook format provides complete creative freedom. There are no algorithm concerns, no content restrictions, no need to sanitize complex themes for broader palatability. This allows for exploration of ideas that might be considered too dark, too complex, or too philosophically challenging for mainstream platforms. Millions of Little Threads represents the beginning of something larger, a collection of mid-length audiobooks that can explore territories unavailable to other formats. These stories can use whatever language is necessary, cover topics that might be inappropriate for video platforms, and develop ideas with the depth and complexity they deserve. The goal isn't just to tell stories, but to create a space where thoughtful, ambitious content can exist without compromise. In a media landscape increasingly dominated by short-form, algorithm-optimized content, there is something revolutionary about creating hour-long narratives that demand sustained attention and intellectual engagement. At $3.99, this audiobook costs less than most people spend on coffee in a single day. But the pricing isn't just about accessibility, it is about demonstrating that quality. Complex content doesn't need to be prohibitively expensive. The goal is to build a sustainable model for creating ambitious projects that can grow increasingly complex and far-reaching over time. For early supporters, there is an additional incentive. Anyone who downloads the audiobook within the first 48 hours receives a free ebook copy of Notes from the End of Everything, creating additional value while building a community of engaged listeners who appreciate this type of content. While Kennedy's story takes place in a near-future setting, the themes it explores are remarkably relevant to our current moment. We already live with devices that track our movements, monitor our vital signs, and influence our thoughts through carefully designed interfaces. Social media platforms use sophisticated algorithms to shape our emotional states and decision-making processes. The brain-machine interface in the story represents the logical endpoint of trends already in motion. We're already cyborgs in many ways, we just haven't acknowledged it yet. Our smartphones have become external organs that store our memories, mediate our relationships, and provide constant access to information that shapes how we think about everything. Perhaps the most unsettling aspect of Kennedy's transformation isn't the physical procedure, but the psychological implications. When the heads-up display appears inside his head rather than in front of him, It raises fundamental questions about the nature of consciousness and identity. Where does Kennedy end and the technology begin? This isn't just a philosophical thought experiment. It is a practical question we'll need to answer as brain-computer interfaces become more sophisticated and widespread. Companies are already developing neural implants for medical purposes, and the technology is advancing rapidly toward more general applications. The best speculative fiction doesn't just imagine future technologies. It explores how those technologies might change what it means to be human. Millions of Little Threads operates in this tradition, using the BMI concept as a lens through which to examine deeper questions about progress, identity, and the nature of consciousness itself. The story's power comes not from its technological predictions, but from its psychological insights. It recognizes that the most profound changes aren't necessarily the most visible ones. The real transformation happens in the subtle shifts in how we think, feel, and relate to ourselves and others. This audiobook represents something more than entertainment. It is an invitation to engage with complex ideas in a format that allows for sustained contemplation. In a world increasingly dominated by bite-sized content designed for immediate consumption, the story doesn't provide easy answers or comfortable resolutions. Instead, it creates space for listeners to grapple with questions that don't have simple solutions. What does progress really mean? How do we maintain our humanity as we become increasingly integrated with technology? What happens to individual identity in a world of shared consciousness? Millions of Little Threads is designed to be the first in a series of audiobooks that push the boundaries of what speculative fiction can accomplish. Each story will explore different aspects of our technological future while maintaining the philosophical depth and psychological complexity that makes this medium so powerful. The vision is to create a body of work that grows increasingly ambitious over time, supported by listeners who appreciate content that challenges rather than merely entertains. This isn't about building a massive audience. It is about cultivating a community of engaged thinkers who want to explore the deeper implications of the world we're creating. The full audiobook provides an hour of uninterrupted storytelling that takes Kennedy's initial transformation and follows it through to its logical and deeply unsettling conclusions. Without spoiling the experience, I can say that the story explores territories that would be impossible to cover in shorter formats or more restrictive mediums. The downloadable format means you can listen anywhere, anytime, without internet connectivity. It is designed to be a complete, self-contained experience that you can revisit and contemplate at your own pace. If you are someone who appreciates speculative fiction that doesn't shy away from complexity, if you enjoy philosophical content that challenges your assumptions about progress and technology, or if you are simply curious about what storytelling looks like when freed from the constraints of algorithm-driven platforms, I believe you'll find this audiobook genuinely compelling. This represents a different approach to content creation, one that prioritizes depth over virality, complexity over simplicity, and sustained engagement over immediate gratification. Your support doesn't just purchase a story, it contributes to the development of increasingly ambitious projects that push the boundaries of what independent creators can accomplish. The future Kennedy experiences in Millions of Little Threads may seem distant, but the questions it raises are immediate and urgent. How we answer them will determine not just what technologies we develop, but who we become in the process of developing them. The complete audiobook is available now, and the journey into this unsettling future begins with a single download. The question isn't whether this future will arrive. It is whether we'll be prepared for what it means when it does.